I'm Ray Kwan, the Vice Chancellor of HR, and I'll be facilitating this open forum. And it's my pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Kristina Whalen, candidate for the Foothill College President. Okay?
Thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate you all coming out. I've already had such wonderful, rich conversations today. And I wanted to take the approach in this opening statement of this public forum to sort of frame my candidacy for you around the reminder that went out for this forum by President Fong, who said that, you know, just as a reminder, what we said we wanted as a president, and then there was a nice little paragraph. And I believe it started by saying that you wanted an experienced leader that could move forward on the strategic thinking of the college, including your strategic vision and equity plan. And so I thought I'd start by telling you a little bit about my experience and maybe just a little bit about me too, so that we could get to know each other. I have about 26 years in higher education. And I started my journey in the state of California by taking my first position post my doctorate at California State University, Chico, up in Chico State. Loved my time there. I positioned myself as a teacher scholar. I was working in the field of feminist rhetorical theories, gender and communication. I considered myself a social justice scholar. I did love my time there, but I took a semester where I was trying to earn just a little extra money, moonlighting, trying to save up for that down payment on a house. And I took a public speaking job at a local community college. And one of the gifts that come with being a public speaking instructor is that you teach storytelling. So you get to hear the stories of the students. And I heard those stories and I was hooked on the promise of community college education. I can still remember some of those first students that I interacted with. The stories were sublime and powerful. I remember my student Kimberly, who was overcoming drug addiction, had spent time on the streets of the Tenderloin, but had turned her life around with the promise of education. I remember Joan, who had first come to community college through the exceptionally gifted AP/BP that was at our community college, had started when she was 9 years old at the community college. Amazing. I called her Doogie Howser. I remember Scryer, who was this incredible student who had just come back to take an argumentation and debate class as part of his monastic training to become a Tibetan monk. And I met this guy, Ben, who had been a long time engineering professional and was coming back to clear his prerequisites because he was retooling to become a nurse. And what was astonishing about him is that he had been the lead engineer for the Burning Man at Burning Man for 4 years. How incredible. All these stories were so incredible. And they really congealed for me my sense of commitment to leadership in education. And I moved from the California State University system over to the community college system at the next available opportunity. And ever since, I've been, shaping my vision for serving students in the California Community College by both accepting every opportunity I have to be a leader. And that, of course, has meant that I was a faculty leader. I believe I left a lot of important work around accreditation at a time when City College of San Francisco needed that leadership most from its faculty. I became a department chair and formed the first communication studies department at City College of San Francisco. I became a dean of fine, applied, and communication arts and got to support the arts, including the Diego Rivera Mural Docent Program at City College of San Francisco. And then I moved into becoming the Associate Vice Chancellor, really marshaling data around enrollment management and supporting curriculum for over 350 degree programs for 60 different departments on a scale that I haven't seen since, but with a sense of purpose and pride. Now, I loved my time at City College, however tumultuous it was, but I knew that I wanted to expand my professional learning. I wanted to take on responsibilities that, given the size and complexity at City College, I would never be given the opportunity for. And so I left City College for Las Positas College, and I'm looking at my 4-year anniversary there in the face as being the Vice President of Academic Services. And in that ad, that paragraph that President Fong had, you also said that you wanted someone who could support the innovation at the college. And I know from talking to you today that that is part of the identity of Foothill College. And the fact that it's paired with such a strong commitment to equity really sharpened my sense of focus for and it really propelled me to bear down on my application and candidacy for being president here. I've led most of the strategic thinking at the colleges that I've been at, and that means that I was the lead for our educational master plan. I've worked as the accreditation liaison officer. I developed a workforce and economic plan that we're really bearing down on as we're coming out of the pandemic and into a sense of recovery and reanimating our campus and really connecting with industry so that we're dealing with this new paradigm of work and education. And all of that couldn't have been possible without the stories of our students. So I might stop there and open it up for questions before I take all the time in my opening monologue.
Well, thank you, Kristina.
Yeah.
Just want to give an editorial comment here, just to let everyone know about the format, that if you have additional questions that you'd like to ask, you can use the index cards and pins that are over there, and Carla and Paula will collect them for you and they'll pass them on to me to ask, okay? We do have some set questions that we'd like to ask you, Kristina.
Yeah, sure.
Is that all right?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. You already told us the first, you must have anticipated my first question. Because the question was, tell us your personal story. So that's great. You've already done that. Can you kind of summarize for us, thanks, why Foothill College as opposed to any other college?
Well, thank you for that, college. You know, I've been looking at making a move to a CEO role for a while, and I know that that's a really important question. Are you just seeking out the title, or are you seeking out the work? And I can definitely say in this case, this was really thoughtfully considered for me to apply to Foothill College. And I know that I just see an opportunity to connect to the mission of this college. And in the conversations that I've had with the groups today, I've talked about what I found so refreshing and profound about your mission statement, that it uses words that are your value statements, and they tell me, and they aligned with the values that I hold: honesty, integrity, transparency. I've mentioned to several groups today how how much I paused on and reflected on the word forgiveness in your mission statement, and how much that resonated with me as a powerful mechanism for doing this kind of work, especially when it's rooted in a sense of doing the work of racial equity and anti-Blackness work. We all have to forgive each other to move that work forward. Mistakes will be made, but the course ahead of us is paved much smoother by the power of forgiveness. Those were some of the words that I connected with that made me want to apply. And what made me delighted to be part of the finalist slate of candidates was really just what was said to me or asked of me in the first interview. The first interview asked me a series of questions, and almost every single one of them connected with equity advancing work. And for me, that meant that I now knew your statement of value, that this was the work that was at the center of everything that you were doing. It's absolutely what you wanted in the next president. And that's work that has been what has transformed my next level of leadership, is to not just focus on equity, but to advance the work. We've had powerful conversations on my own college campus around anti-Blackness, anti-racism, as well as what it means to decenter whiteness as a mechanism for understanding our world. I serve on my own president's advisory for equity and anti-racism, and that seems to be who you are as well, doing that work, doing it faithfully, doing it with a sense of integrity, honesty, transparency, and forgiveness. And so that really motivated my application. Thank you.
Thanks, Kristina. Next question is a bit longer. It says,
Okay.
Foothill College continues to be an outstanding institution despite profound difficulties with administration in recent years. Please describe your accomplishments as an administrator that would inspire confidence in your ability to continue the healing process, improve labor relations, and advance the equity agenda.
Well, thank you. I've met with students and administrators and classified professionals. It's when I got to my session with the faculty that I mentioned that I had spent a great deal of time reading about your most recent upheaval here at the college. And I wanted you to know that I very thoughtfully read through the letters that went to the Board of Trustees during that time as a way to really reflect on where you have been, what's hopefully in your rear view mirror, but also may be a force of residual pain for this college. And I also mentioned that I wanted to pay particular attention to the voices of the students in those letters, because I know that that leadership change was also very painful for them, especially for those students that felt that they were seeing in a chief executive officer an identity category that they hadn't seen there before, and that was powerful. I wanted to also, though, reflect thoughtfully on all of the people who took leadership positions and then retreated back to other positions that they had in the college, to think about that and what that would mean for my presidency if I was selected. And just to begin to use what I learned in reading all of that as a way to unpack my own success on being able to bring people together and being fortunate enough to do that so that people feel respected and heard. And sometimes it's hard to peel the onion on that, or I'll mix up a bunch of metaphors and say, what's the secret sauce in all of that? Sometimes you really don't know, but I do have a very wonderful relationship with my labor leaders at my school, and you might be saying, come on now. No, I really, really do. And I think it's because we do the work together. Our faculty contract builds in work around strategic enrollment management, and the committee that does that is co-chaired by me and the president of the Faculty Association. And at first I looked at that and went, oh, whoa, what's that? And now I look at that and I go, brilliant, brilliant. We're working and making decisions together. And I've watched, my faculty colleagues taking ownership over that, having to communicate out the rationale. So I think if you're rationale building together, I have shared with everybody that, one of my strategies for having a high morale workforce and a high morale colleagues is for people to feel like if we write something down on paper, create some process together, that we're co-signing, we're co-authors. And that phrase of co-signing, think about how powerfully that affects people when somebody is co-signing onto something. I think that if I came here to Foothill College, I would continue with that methodology. I want your name next to mine, not below it, maybe sometimes above it, but certainly beside it, saying that we authored this together. I think that goes a long way to building back mutual respect that may now suddenly be in flux because of past work hurt. And I'll come to you with my heart forward, doing what I can to understand that pain, move past it, and move forward. I use this book by, I believe the author is Kevin Gannon. It's called Radical Hope, and it's a book about transformative teaching. And in it, I love one of the first couple of pages because you may or may not know, but I live in San Francisco, and I have for 20 years. And one of my favorite authors is a San Francisco, Rebecca Solnit. She has a quote in there that says, hope is not, clutching a lottery ticket on your couch. Hope is an axe that breaks down doors in the case of an emergency. And I love that quote. And I think that I would want to have a leadership here. I would want to have a leadership style here that engenders hope, that kind of hope that breaks down those doors.
Thank you, Kristina. You probably answered in part this next question, but I'd like you to focus on...
I like the way I'm anticipating these, Ray.
Yeah, you're so smart, you're anticipating the questions, okay? So the question is, how have you maintained good relations with classified employee labor reps, besides what you've already said?
Sure. At my current work at Las Positas College, I think over the last couple of years, we've really grappled with a feeling among our classified leadership that they showed up to meetings, but really their value add, which had the potential to be enormously impactful, wasn't being realized, that they were an untapped resource. And I certainly couldn't claim that I'm the architect of being able to turn that around, and maybe we haven't completely turned that around, but I think we're on the road to recovery in terms of having classified professionals at Las Positas College that feel seen and heard, but more importantly, just feel like their value add to the institution is being understood and being harnessed. And a couple of things that we did, you know, we just went through our institutional self-evaluation. I know where you all are in the process. So you have a lot to look forward to because this new process is so much better. But you know, we spent we had a lot of dialogue about would we write something down as an improvement plan? And what would that be? And we were going to be very cautious about that because if we wrote it down on a horizon in which there were diminishing resources, we better be full on committed to it. And the plan that we wrote down was around ensuring participation of our classified professionals. I've shared that throughout the day. I mean, you're making a powerful commitment to say, not just that I'll bring classified professionals to the table, but I will ensure their participation. And one of the ways that I think we've sort of greased the wheels or added juice to that is, you know, a couple of forums. Those were hosted by the president, so he's provided me with a wonderful model for approaching this, should I become president here, and said, what's important to you? We have all these strategic goals, and I'd really like the classified professionals to lead one of them. And they actually wanted to lead the Caring Campus initiative by the Institute for Evidence-Based Change. And so they've grant writing, provided funding, hosted the training, penned commitments, and we definitely, the presidents, the other vice presidents, and I, who host a town meeting every month, give over a lot of the airtime of that town meeting to putting forward the goals and objectives and activities of that Caring Campus community. And that has, I think, now created a culture in which that's expected, that a major planning priority is being led and executed expertly by our classified professionals. And I couldn't imagine that I wouldn't take those lessons with me into this. I have a wonderful relationship with my classified Senate president, and I've worked somewhat with our labor representation. I was at the collective bargaining table for our faculty contract, but not our contract with SEIU. But I do provide some feedback to those negotiations. So that's probably how I would answer that, hopefully sufficiently.
Yes,
Sure.
Thanks, Kristina.
Oh, let me guess. No, I'm just kidding.
Okay, what is it?
Yeah,
I know. I'm thinking about
it's
the
like
question.
that Johnny Carson
Yeah.
thing, right? I'm dating myself.
It's okay.
Okay.
This is kind of a related question. So,
Okay.
It says, what practices have you incorporated, beside what you already mentioned, to mitigate issues between administrators, managers, and supervisors and classified employees? Besides what you've already said, anything else you'd like to add to that?
And the question is to mitigate
issues.
Mitigate issues. I'm not sure I have too much more to add to that. I'm trying to conjure a couple more examples. Certainly I might bring forward the work that, if you put together a coalition of people who are moving some of your strategic priorities forward, like guided pathways, as we have done. We're also really all categories, administration, classified professionals, and faculty, working together to think about some of the important work that we know we need to do, which is putting together evaluation instruments that measure equity competency. That's really important work when you bring people to the table. As I said, under this framework of co-authorship, I think that helps mitigate issues.
Okay. Thank you. That finishes the formal questions. I have some questions from the audience. So
Oh, okay.
I
Great.
have not screened them. I don't know what they are, so we'll just see what they are, okay? It says in 2020, a group of student activists sent the president a letter of 12 demands to improve racial equity at Foothill College, including trauma-informed mental health services, reimagining campus safety, and racial equity in curriculum and faculty. How would your presidency ensure that these demands are met?
Well, those 3 demands sound pretty good to me. I mean, I've definitely have seen student demands before and listened carefully to them. Know that they're I've talked throughout the day. If you've been in any of my constituency talks about how I put student voice at the center of the crafting of any processes or change to processes, any major strategic initiatives such as guided pathways. Sometimes when students enter into that, they're in learning mode, learning that we have a faculty contract, or we have those are really teachable moments that can be powerful for a student. But I would enter into a couple of those, like for instance, you had mentioned campus safety, right? I could draw upon my own experience on dealing with our campus safety relationship, and I've been deep into the conversations on 21st century policing. We have created some curriculum around that, and even partnered with our local law enforcement agencies so that their training as they move from sort of rank and file police officers into management within law enforcement, that it involves a certificate around 21st century policing. As part of that partnership, especially with the city of Livermore, that was held up as an example of the way that community colleges, educational institutions, but in this case community colleges, can really be a powerful lever for equity in the community, and that the reverberation of impact from a community college can go out into the community. So there was a lot of lessons in those conversations that I think I could bring to this campus as well. And I might even broaden the conversation a little bit. Policing isn't just done by people in uniforms. We've had really delicate conversations that we're still working through on our campus about the policing of students in other ways, for instance, through test proctoring. And this is, I think, an issue in which we have competing opinions about, for instance, the use of proctorio, and what's evidence coming forward that proctorio treats people differently based upon the color of their skin, and others who feel like it's a mechanism that they need in the new world of online teaching. And we're delicately navigating that, but with a sense of urgency. So I think that students have those demands, and if they see you're being responsible for them and moving them forward thoughtfully, in good faith, then we get somewhere. We're fostering the kind of student leadership that I think helps our college grow. What were the other 2 examples? Were they the demands on culturally competent curriculum?
Yeah,
right?
trauma-informed mental health services, reimagining campus safety, and racial equity in curriculum and faculty.
I mean, the students are spot on. Trauma-informed campus community and services that help provide trauma-informed care is so important. I think it's part now of the statewide dialogue that exists over providing social determinant interventions at the college. So, when I'm at the CIO convention with Kurt, we've heard about downstream, taking care of a problem downstream. And, we can't ensure learning in our classrooms when students are experiencing trauma, or they're hungry, or they're housing insecure. So we have to take care of those issues downstream to get to our core mission of teaching and learning. So I think that's spot on, and I've been able to share throughout the day just I think there are formative ideas that I've been able to co-author with, in this case mostly faculty that are interested in taking all the knowledge they have about health and wellness, seeing a horizon in which a lot of their knowledge about those issues is being removed from the general education pattern, but saying how can we still do good and be impactful, and use that curriculum to serve students at this college in other ways. And I love these talks. I'm excited about where they might go. I shared with the faculty that we've been looking at the model for mental health, mindfulness, et cetera, that exists down at Fullerton College. So the students are spot on. And I know that students are hungry to see themselves in the curriculum in their classrooms. And there's a growing awareness, I think, among all of us how urgently important that is, and thankfully, some statewide funding to help make that a reality. So, as CEO, I would just be making sure that that was being used for its intended purposes and using our shared governance system to put it to its best use to meet that student demand.
Thanks, Kristina. This one is a lengthy question, so if you want me to repeat part of it, that's fine. I'm going to make sure I get this right, okay? Okay, it says, the California community college system puts a great deal of power in the hands of instructors, which often results in a lack of need to involve the rest of the campus community. Considering the value of the work and expertise of classified professionals, especially in the provision and support of wraparound services, how would you approach this power dynamic and ensure all community college employees have input into the decision-making process?
Okay, I got that one. Okay, I think it's hard to say concretely what I would do on that issue, having not yet, been here, had a chance to get to know you, to do, I think, what would be, typical of somebody as they're onboarding, to have a series of listening sessions so that I'm making decisions or I'm offering suggestions in concert with you and informed by your organizational knowledge, historical memory of this place. So that's all my throat clearing. My throat clearing on answering that question. I think there's some wonderful things to consider, but I love the spirit of that question because it says that student success is all our responsibility. And I think that that's been the approach that I've taken in guided pathways work, where we've moved from having powerful interventions for equity and student success on our campus to really moving to a cohort management model within academic and career pathways. And I know that we can assign faculty liaisons to each of those pathways, but a model that I have found ample evidence really works is that you expand that out to include classified professionals, and that you really do have a whole system of support from all perspectives of the college that are providing those wraparound supports, that are reaching out to the students within an academic cohort to make sure that they're meeting their milestones, that we all agreed what those milestones were, and now we have a team of people that are leading that work. And we're seriously considering at our campus to hire a classified professional in each of those pathways to help us organize that work. And I think that could be a powerful lever for advancing that work because of the perspective of service that so many of our classified professionals have, or the perspective of organizational expertise that you have from working in offices that might not be student-facing. So there's a couple of examples that might give you a flavor of the approach that I might have.
Thanks, Kristina. Next question. How have you demonstrated an ability to work and support shared governance processes, including a commitment to active students, staff, and faculty engagement?
Great. Well, I heavily participate in shared governance. My president points out multiple times that I serve on more shared governance committees than anyone else on the Las Positas campus. I'm not sure that it's a badge of honor, but it certainly means that I've logged lots of miles working within shared governance. I think it's going to meetings. Sometimes maybe feels like it's not the most impactful work, but I have found that even in some ancillary training that was provided in California Guided Pathways and maybe reinforced in some of the Aspen professional learning I have about the way that you can craft a meeting so that it is actually a lever for decision making rather than a routine exercise in moving through an agenda. And maybe that resonates for you. You've probably had both those experiences, right? That a meeting is really moving the work forward, and a meeting was, I can't even remember. It's like driving home and you can't even remember that you turned the wheel of a car. I want more of the former and less of the latter. But, I have a colleague, I hope he'll forgive me for talking about him at this forum, but he sometimes takes a meeting and looks who's in it and then, does a back of the napkin calculation about how much the meeting cost. Like based upon what he has penned out is the hourly wage of each of the people in it. And sometimes I've chuckled at that too, like you all are doing now. But in a sense, I wanted to also say that when people come to me and want to talk with me, I put down the phone, the one that actually has a cord to it, my other phone, and listen because, I shared earlier that lots of people start their discussions with me by saying, I know you're busy. And I'm like, you've come to tell me something, and it's important that you've taken the time. I'm going to put down the phone. I'm going to listen. This is the work that I do, is to take your feedback and incorporate it. And I feel like I do that as a matter of recognition about how important that is, so that I'm reflecting back out the work, I'm getting it accurate, I'm sharing with my campus community the work that we're doing. And that really moves into the approach that I take in shared governance as well. I think there are just some other small things that you do to make shared governance truly powerful. Like maybe they seem like no-brainers, but you would find that most people struggle to do them, like showing up prepared. like you've read all of the stuff, and really, you're really there in a moment of engagement and that shared governance work. And so that's always been a commitment that I've tried to make for myself and keep. And I feel like that's why, people know that I'm in the room when I'm in a shared governance situation, rather than having to check the minutes to see if I'm there. So I want to be felt.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Kristina. Next question. Will you support the findings of the feasibility study if it concludes building affordable housing on campus as part of the bond ballot is viable? And would you support allocating as much as $300 million for student, staff, and faculty affordable housing?
That was incredibly precise. That was incredibly precise.
I didn't write it.
Well, I don't think I could make any commitments about what I would support from this vantage point right now, and I hope that that could make sense to you. But I have talked throughout the day how I, as a concept for reanimating a campus, this is a strategy that we're exploring full bore at Las Positas College for a couple of different reasons. Because we listened to our students. We got lots of students input as to what are some significant barriers to them being able to take more units, to be successful, to stay on track, to transfer to their next educational goal or into the workforce, and housing shows up in the top 3 every time. This is not an inexpensive place to live. I think you all know that. You probably know that in spades. So it's such a powerful, it's such a powerful thing to explore, to say, we want you to live here. I mean, what that communicates. We want you to live here, to be part of this campus. And I think it could go a long way to, my early thoughts on why I'm so interested in exploring in depth student housing. And now that we have at least some monies to make that possible at our own institution, are all those reasons that it speaks powerfully, it addresses a need, it's a downstream solution, it gets students to campus, and we know that the more time students spend on campus, the more successful they are. There's so much in there. So that amount of money and an early yes to a feasibility study, I couldn't do that now, but I hope I've given voice to why I would definitely be reading that document and participating in whatever measure I could in that study.
Okay. Thanks, Kristina. Mm-hmm. Next question. How will you help bring faculty and students back to campus?
Oh, well, we turned a corner this fall in terms of bringing students back to campus, and I'm not sure yet what those levels would be like here at Foothill. Obviously, I need a lot of explanation. I've got to connect with your data, connect with the students, connect with all the constituency groups on what you're seeing and hearing to kind of understand what our students need. But I definitely know that if we ask the students who are struggling the most what they need, we'll probably get closer to the right balance of in-person to on-campus instruction. I mean, just asking, I think, we've been struggling at my current institution with asking the students who have already championed the gauntlet of COVID and have stayed in school how they think the campus should look, and have not yet found a solution to finding out what a student would need to come back, the students that have left us. And that's a problem that I think we have to solve in order to get the right mix. I heard from President Fong that you're about 40% back. I've heard, a lot of different, I've heard, the commitment here has always been to online instruction. I think that's absolutely true. I've heard some student voice saying that they'd really like more people back here on campus too. I'm sure there's a range of opinions on that. But I'm attempting to answer this by saying the approach I would take to answering the question, but I think it really has to be, the North Star has to be the struggling student. The North Star has to be the student that we lost to figure out what a return to campus looks like, how robust it is, or that it's a reimagined, flexible model of providing instructional and student services. This is a paradigm shifting time in education, and I feel we can figure it out together,
Okay.
I'll end there.
Okay, thanks, Kristina. Next question. We've gone round and around about this one at Foothill. Is campus governance participatory or shared? And for whom?
Well, what'd you all decide?
Kurt, you got the answer, right? I've been in arenas where both those titles were used, and I think I understood the motivations for why one lands on one description versus the other. So I think, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna say both are true. I'm going to say both are true. There are, certainly in the model that I have now, in which some of the committees, their reporting lines come up through contractual obligations that are written into bargaining agreements. I would characterize that kind of governance differently than the 10 committees that report up through the Academic Senate, and a whole other host of committees that come up through, that don't go through the Academic Senate, but are really, a reporting structure goes up to our College Council, which is, our equivalent of MIPSI. So I think it's both, but I definitely would like to, go a couple more rounds so that everyone agrees on what's what. I'm okay with that. Let's do it again. Okay, thanks, Kristina. So next question. How do you see your role as president play out in improving enrollment and ensuring quality of our programs here at Foothill?
Thank you. I think when I looked into, I looked at your fast facts and sort of charted a couple other places to look at how severe the enrollment decline here is at Foothill, and it looked familiar. And I understand that the enrollment decline was happening before COVID, and now it's been accelerated in ways that are uncomfortable. I think, generally I would say partnering. We're going to partner our way towards more robust enrollment. And I have some experience being a voice in the community that can stand up partnerships that would help enrollment. I see in your strategic enrollment, or your strategic equity plan, a commitment to dual enrollment. And I know you already have one that is strong, and I think it could be further supercharged. We're doing that at my institution where we already have a middle college. We're going to try to double it. We already have MOUs through our regional occupational program, but we're creating more CCAPs that take students through an introduction of our career and academic pathways. And we're bringing all of the school districts to our campus to have kind of a post-COVID summit about what the needs are and how we can partner together for an equitable enrollment recovery. And some of those same principles that we would use in partnering with our educational institutions, I think are true as we're partnering with community organizations and partnering with industry. What did COVID do to so many industries? They already saw a silver tidal wave, and it accelerated through COVID. And some industries are just like, they're showing up on my door, help us. I don't have enough aircraft mechanics to run my airport any longer. I need your help. This is an opportunity that we can seize upon. I talked about earlier about, the curriculum process, the programmatic development process is slow, it's deliberate, but there are ways to accelerate those that we could feel comfortable with. And I'm here to kind of share some of those innovative ideas with you as well. So I think enrollment recovery, I'm watching also, the learning curve for me when I get here, my learning curve will be that I've never worked in a quarter system before. We're working on how to leverage different scheduling solutions to bring students back. When I've asked my CIO partners that are experiencing a 5% to 15% enrollment boost from starting this fall, what are you doing? I want to do that. Tell me what you're doing. A lot of them are using, they're on semester systems and they're using the 8-week. Fall 1, fall 2, spring 1, spring 2. That's bringing students back to college because if they can't make it the whole way, they already have a transcriptable class on their transcript in a single semester. So what that looks like in a quarter system, I would have to, I show up here needing to learn, but that's kind of a menu of options that I put before you. Let's partner our way and think creatively about our educational offerings to students, and I do think they'll come back.
Thanks, Kristina. We have my closing question right now. He says we have about 5 minutes left.
Okay.
Please use the remaining time to circle back to any questions that you'd like to either expand on or share any additional final thoughts with us.
Oh, thank you. I don't know that I have much more, that I can think of right now in this moment to expand upon, but I do want to maybe circle back to the power of storytelling for just a minute. We just had Veterans Day, and I was searching for this photo of my father who was in the Navy. As a Navy veteran. It's my favorite picture of him because it's kind of candid, and he's about 17 years old. And when I was looking for it, I actually came across this other picture of him when he was 3 or 4 years old, and he was in his father's work truck, which, this is like early 1940s, so you can imagine what that truck looked like. And it was his Bell telephone truck. Because my grandfather Harry Newton Shriver, we called him Newt. He didn't have an education past the 8th grade. But he, carved out a living for his family, hanging telephone wire for Bell Telephone. That allowed, food on the table and clothes on the back. But the thought that he could send his 3 sons to college was completely off the table. But my father came home when he was 17 years old with a piece of paper, and it was, he wanted to enlist in the Navy. And because he was a minor, he needed my grandparents' signature. And my grandmother went, "Oh no," and got up and left. And my grandfather took the paper out of my dad's hands and signed it. So as a 17-year-old, my dad entered the Navy. He served his country. He was a communications technician. And on the other side of that, he had the GI Bill. The GI Bill, this access to education. And in, that one exercise of educational access, he changed the trajectory of generational poverty. And, I think of that powerful lever, which is education. I hold that story with me when I think about walking in purpose as a leader, leading a college. And I hope it's a story that resonates with you, that we share that purpose, and I would be honored to be your next president.
Very good. Thank you, Kristina.